Okay, we'll start then. So good evening. Just first, welcome to all this webinar. This would be our fifth webinar, this international one. And hope you all can hear my voice. And if anyone have any issues in hearing my voice, you can just let me know, right? And if you feel any laggings or internet connections, please let us know. And it's better if everyone just turn their mics off, okay? So you can see my screen now, right? Yeah. Okay. So today's actually this is a short webinar of 1 hour. We'll try to cover a specific um, title, right? Which is the 3D workflow. So we're going to talk about the architectural visualization by using SketchUp. Okay? So basic modeling software that we're going to use today is SketchUp, and along with Lumion and V-Ray, and also with Adobe Photoshop. So which means in the 3D workflow, the architectural workflow, more than one software have to be used. That's what we call a workflow. So you have to understand these terminologies or these words. Like the workflow means the stages basically. So in order to produce the final image or the final render, right, the final 3D image, what stages that we had to do from the scratch. So scratch means from the beginning. So in this context, in this architectural visualization, the 2D plan is our beginning data, we can call that, right? Maybe the CAD file or the PDF. So when we are working with a client, an architect or an engineer or some kind of contractor or any client, they might give us the basic plan, the 2D plan, which going to be our scratch file or scratch data. So from that 2D plan onwards, we're going to start modeling it by using various modeling softwares. And in this, building industry, we can just architectural industry, we use mainly SketchUp, 3ds Max, and sometimes Blender. If you heard about those softwares, right? So now these set of softwares, now commonly used modeling software here, like SketchUp, 3ds Max, Rhinoceros, Grasshopper, those are some kind of modeling softwares mostly used by in civil department or in building department, right? And this SketchUp has a prominent place, and also 3ds Max, both are the most commonly used software. And then that's what we call the modeling part, right? So from 2D plan, then to create the model by using these modeling softwares, and then the next part is the rendering, which we're going to use some other set of softwares like, as you know, the Lumion, V-Ray, and other rendering softwares like this Corona Render, FStorm, D5, and Enscapes, and even this Twinmotion, Unreal Engine. You might heard about these softwares, right? And we're going to, like today in this webinar, we're going to see about Lumion and also the V-Ray, right? Just to know about what are the other rendering and real-time softwares are there. And after rendering, we have the final workflow, final stage in the 3D workflow. We call that post-production, right? So post-production basically means editing, or we can call the final touches by using editing softwares like Photoshop, right? If it's a still image, we can use Photoshop or other photo editing softwares. Or if it's a walkthrough, right? It's like a fly through walkthrough some videos, we can use Adobe Premiere Pro, After Effects, or any other video editing softwares. So we use those softwares to do some minor corrections like color gradings, for example, and adding text or logos, something like that. So those called the post processing or post production stage. So this is what the 3D workflow of this arc is. So the modeling, rendering, and post production, right? So the modeling, comes with a SketchUp here. So SketchUp is pretty simple compared, like it's not that complex or complicated comparing to 3ds Max or other modeling softwares. In other ways, like SketchUp software is some kind of limited version. For example, when it comes to animation, like there's no room for SketchUp to do animations, right? Then we need to switch to other softwares like 3ds Max. But other than that, most of the stuff can be done with this software. And so now imagine like we got the 2D plan, right, from the client, most probably the CAD version, CAD file, or the PDF version. Getting CAD version is much better, like we can directly import a CAD file into SketchUp, right? But there's no way, now note this down, like there's no way to import a PDF file directly into the SketchUp. So we don't have any use with a PDF file. So the CAD file is always better to start the modeling, right? And then once we get the 2D plan inside the SketchUp, we need to start modeling, like just by using these basic tools. Now you can see in this window, like in my SketchUp, there's a bunch of plugins here, right? So much of plugins. And there are even more plugins available in the market, in website, right? Just for free, and we can pay. Some plugins have to pay, but there's a bunch of plugins available there. We call that plugins. Like if you heard the word plugin, like they do not come with SketchUp app by default, right? We need to download plugins separately to do some specific work that cannot be done with SketchUp itself, right? For example, now this tool here, right? This toolbox is the default toolbox of SketchUp, or we call it the large toolbox, which includes the line tool, rectangle, all the basic tools that we need for basic modelings. For example, if you need to create the walls of a house, right? Walls, columns, slabs, floors, and maybe the staircases, something like that, simple shapes. So just basic lines, and you can create whatever the shapes you want by using these basic tools that are available. But in some instances, we might need additional plugins to create some complicated structures or complicated elements. So when we take a house, for example, right? So the house has components. So it has wall, it has slabs, or maybe if it's a roofed house, right? So there's a roof. Now comparing to wall and roof, wall is a simple structure. You just need two lines and you can create the wall. But when it comes to the roof part is some kind of complicated, right? So we can't create for the roof has rafters and eaves and valance boards, etc. So those are tiny details, and we can't spend so much of our time by using these basic tools available. So in that case, we need additional plugins. Now, for example, now let's imagine this is a house, right? Just without any details. This is a house, and we need to create a roof for this, right? So we have a plugin to create roof. So I'm going to click this surface. We have extensions and roof. We have this set of types of roofs, right? That's it. So that's a matter of seconds. We can create roofs. And if we want to show some additional information like rafters, right? Then we have to use another plugin. Something like this. And give it a time. So, right. Now that plugin automatically calculated all the distance, heights, and everything, and it gave us this regular rafters. Right? So the thing is, there are plugins that simplifies these kind of complicated works, right? So that is the advantage of SketchUp, that we can create any kind of shapes or any kind of components by using these plugins. Okay. And then there are the other things like what are the other elements that we have, like the doors, windows, right? And then we come to the part of detailing, right? So when we say detailing, we commonly refer to the interior detailing. For example, the furnitures, chairs, and lightings, right? So light sources, what kind of light sources we have to need, we need, what style of furnitures that we need. So in that case, like, so basic modeling thing we will do by using all the tools and plugins available. Then for the detailing part, we need the help or the support from third party, or we normally call it third party websites, right? For example, the 3D warehouse. You might heard about these websites, 3D warehouse, and there are other websites that offer free models, right? Models for a chair, or maybe characters or vehicles or plants, light sources. So all the tiny detailings for an interior we can get from the market, from the website. That part comes under the detailing part, right? So for example, I'll show you the now. Okay, let me take this for an example. Now this is my collection. Now once you start practicing this architectural visualization, you might need to start getting your own collection by searching and exploring the 3D warehouse and other free websites that offer you free models, right? So here we have this this bedroom model. Okay, so this bedroom model means that specific model have all these components, like this realistic bed, these tables, like all the other components. So which means we can download this specific model and we can get this bed, right? We can separate this bed out of this model and we can use it in our own house or own model. So those are the things that you need to understand. Like maybe if you take another example, like doors, right? So these are the bunch of door collections. Whatever we need to know the exact keywords, what kind of doors, like for example wooden doors or rolling doors, shutter doors, something like that, and we can search it on 3D warehouse and it will give us millions of results with high detailed models. So that comes in the detailing part, the modeling part, and then detailing. Detailing depends on that completely depends on the client. Like they will give the ideas, references, and sometimes mood boards we call it. So they will give what's the color they should use, or you should use to the walls, what color the furniture should be, right? What style of light they have to use. So you will refer to that exact model in website and you download that model and you place in the exact position in the interior, right? And after the detailing part, we have another thing that we can do with the modeling stuff. Now remember that we did not go to the rendering part yet, right? We're still in the modeling part. So in modeling, so after you model all the basic stuff and arrange all the detailings and all the elements, we have the texturing. Texturing is the most important part, which is responsible for the realistic level of your final output. Now texturing means basically materials, right? So what are the materials that we're going to use and where to get those realistic materials? Now if you already have experience with SketchUp, right? Now SketchUp offers some material library like this here, okay? And it says asphalt and concrete and brick collections. Now the thing is, we can use this for a final production render. Why? Because these are low quality, we can say, right? See, if I zoom in, you can see like it's getting blurred, or the pixels, you can see the pixels, right? Which is, those are very low quality materials in SketchUp library. We can use this for just for a reference, but for a final product or a final image, we can't stick with this collection. So we need to find another source to get high quality and realistic materials. So for that, we have as same as the okay. So same as like the 3D warehouse and other model websites, we also have websites for these textures and materials. Right? For example, I will show this one. Can you see this Quixel bridge? Right. So now this software, not software. Now this library like thing website, it offers us free materials, right? So we have thousands of free material, not free, we need to pay for to get some materials as well, but those are very realistic materials. We call it uh, scans or real life scans, right? Now for example, if you take this, right, now this is a material. Now this we call the ground material, right, which is it's basically a ground. Now it's the look at the level of detail it has, all the moss, the sand and the rock particles. Now the thing is how they made or how they create these surfaces or create these materials are they photo scan the exact physical land. Like for example, if there is a ground like this in actual world, okay, they photo scan, they scan that specific land and convert it to a 3D asset. That's what we call scans. So if you search in the web like photo scans or mega scans, you will get results like this. These are very hyper realistic materials. We also can get brickworks, right, asphalt, concrete, and wood collections. We have a huge wood collection, right? So we're going to download this and we can apply in our house model. Not only this, but we also have other lot of websites, right? uh, I'll give you the links if you want at the end of the session. Like that you can get bunch of materials, free materials, and 4K quality materials. So that's what we call the texturing. That's just not it, but in rendering part, when it's come to rendering part, we need more tools to create some realistic characteristic of those materials. Right? So modeling part includes the basic modeling from 2D plan, like the walls and other detailings, roof detailings, and also the interior parts. And then we go to the rendering part. So this is where there's a huge difference between V-Ray and Lumion. Since we are talking about those two softwares specifically, you need to understand the basic difference between V-Ray and Lumion, right? So V-Ray, we call it a plugin. Lumion is a standalone software. So what is the difference between a standalone and a plugin, right? So plugin means you can't have a separate app for V-Ray, like you have separate app for SketchUp and other maybe any kind of apps. V-Ray is just a plugin. See, this is V-Ray. That's all. V-Ray for SketchUp. So we have a couple of plugins. That's all what V-Ray is. So it's just a plugin that attached with a SketchUp. Okay. So inside that, we have all the tools that we need for rendering. So we have lights, we have render settings, right? We have render resolution, depth of field. Those are advanced stuffs. So all the things, all the rendering tools are included in this plugin. Okay. Lumion, in other hand, is a separate app like this. Right now, you might feel some network laggings when I share the Lumion one, but it's okay. Lumion is a separate app. So in order to use the Lumion, we need to complete the model first in SketchUp, right? And then export the model to this Lumion software and then do the rest of the stuff in here. But V-Ray is something different. When we use V-Ray, modeling and rendering goes parallelly, we can say that. Right? So while we are modeling, we can also do the rendering part with V-Ray. But with Lumion, we need to finish everything with a model. All the materials, all the textures, all the lightings, every detail. And then after that, we import the model to Lumion and do the other stuffs, which is creating which is the rendering basically, right? So, furnishing, we call it furnishing with the library, Lumion library, right? Trees and other materials, and see these flying birds, etc. Okay. Which one is the best? Now that depends. The word best depends on a lot of factors. Now, based on the realistic factor, right? We raise the top in the market, right? Based on the realistic factor. When you take the 3D market, there are a bunch of softwares like V-Ray, Corona Render. Now, just for your record, V-Ray and Corona Render is the top softwares or top plugins in this context, right? Both produce hyper-realistic images. But those two softwares or those two plugins needs a lot of skills, which means it's not that simple. It's very complicated. Everything we need to do is manual, right? We need to give all the materials, its characters, everything, right? It's very hard to learn, and it takes so much of time to render, right? For example, if Lumion takes 10 minutes to render an image, the same image with same resolution takes almost an hour or maybe 2 hours to render in V-Ray, right? So quality comes with the price. That's what we have to know. But Lumion is getting improved a little bit. Like Lumion 12 has been released recently, if you know that, and they have improved their reflective aspects and characteristic and they have included more textures, more materials, and they have expanded their library. Now, why most of the people seek Lumion is because of its library, right? Now, Lumion has a huge library for the trees. See, a huge collection of trees, palm trees, everything, and vehicles, right? Characters, people. So this is the reason Lumion is more demanded in this software, in this context, this architectural visualization, right? The thing we need to do is to present our design to public, right? That is the ultimate goal. So when a client comes you or a client hires you, a 3D artist, to visualize his plan or his idea, what is the ultimate goal in that? The specific space has to be visualized perfectly that the client expects, right? So for example, if you take a large housing scheme, like an apartment, a set of apartments, what is the need of 3D visualization for an apartment? Like before start the construction process, they need to do the promotional work, right? So once they finish the entire construction work for this apartment, people have to maybe people should be ready, right, to buy those flats to apartments. So that purpose we need to deliver much as realistic images, that's this is what this apartment will going to look like, then only the clients or the people will seek and will just, you know, think to afford that specific flat or apartment. So in that level of productional rendering, we call it the production render, right? Which means to, in order to publish. Now, academics render is different. Now, if you think about that, like for example, architects, engineers, town and country planners in the academic level, right? Academic level, we don't need to produce super realistic images or walkthroughs. That is a different kind of thing. But for the production level rendering, like our renders and walkthroughs going to publish, right? So those production level rendering should be realistic as much as possible. So that's why, you know, when you try to work with foreign clients or remote clients or high level architectural firms, they demand you or they expect some level of qualifications from you. For example, do you know these specific softwares? Do you know 3ds Max? Do you know SketchUp? And most of them expects V-Ray along with Lumion, but V-Ray is some kind of a professional qualification for them to express or to publish their own design, right? So if you ask me which is the best software, it's very hard to answer. It depends on so much factor, but when it comes to reality, V-Ray is the best one. Okay, so the modeling part and rendering part. So when it comes to rendering, so you know the difference between V-Ray and Lumion. So once we set everything with the rendering, right? The rendering, the, you know, here you can see how the sunlight looks, how the frame has been set, okay, and how the camera has been placed in order to capture a part of this model and part of this environment and the background. Okay, so that's a huge thing. Like we can't just do any kind of camera positioning or any kind of daylight. In order to create a standard or a professional rendering, there are some things that we need to follow in this 3D workflow. There's a specific way to keep your frame. Okay, you can't just go and set your frame randomly like this. Right? It may look beautiful, but there are some standards and rules, right? Now, if you interested in photography, right, the photographers know those rules, right? So in a specific frame, if you want to focus something, how we frame that thing, right? So those are important things in rendering. So just for your information, right? So how a frame should be, we call it composition and balancing. So we need to compose our frame. So we have these basic rules for how to compose a photography, right? Symmetrical compositions. We can't do symmetrical composition all the time, right? Most of the time, asymmetrical compositions like this is the best way to focus an object. So there are so much of theories and rules behind this, right? And also selecting the mood, feel, which comes mainly in the rendering part. Now rendering, now for example, Lumion has skies, right? How to set your sunlight. We have this realistic sky, for example. Can you see this? The collection of skies. So this is going to determine the entire light setting of the image that you're going to produce. Okay. We have morning, overcast. Overcast means rainy day, sunset, and clear night. So these are called real skies, or in technical terms, we call it HDRIs. Okay. So we have to use HDRI to determine our sun position, our skylight, everything. And then how to use them in a specific amount. So what brightness it should be, not too bright or not too dark, in a perfect level. So that comes with a lot of practice and also with a lot of test renders. We can't just go and set a frame and create a final render. We need to do so much of test renders and get approval from the client, right? It's a huge process, the workflow is. Now that is Lumion for you, just for now. So which means Lumion is way more easier comparing to all other rendering softwares that are available. When it comes to V-Ray, now this is the V-Ray editing panel. Okay, V-Ray asset editor we call it. Now it's just by the look you can say it's too complicated, right? There's a lot of tools and numeric values, numbers, right? In Lumion, you don't have to input any numbers. You just have to slide bars to adjust the values. But here, everything is manual. You need to input values, right? For example, just for the record now, this first setting is engine. So which engine you're going to use for your render? So they have given 3 options: CPU, CUDA, and RTX. So what are these? Now these are the hardware that your computer have. Now that's another important thing for you. If you want to do large scale or very hyper realistic V-Ray renders, your hardware matters, right? With a very low level of performance, you can do beautiful renders even in Lumion. At least your computer have to meet that minimum or the recommended value. For example, your computer should have a GPU, in simple words, right? In most of the laptops, it doesn't have a GPU. It just comes only with a CPU. So you need to check, or if you want to do this practice, the ArcViz or CG artist, you need to get the knowledge about this computer stuff or the hardware stuff. So which GPU is better, which CPU is better, how much RAM should we have, or how much maybe the hardware or the what we call the storage we have, something like that. And we have the quality settings. We have medium and high plus, right? And we have the resolution here. So now 800 by 450 is the lowest resolution. So for a production level render, we go at least 2500, right? We call it 2K or 4K resolution, that much of values, because they might have to print your final image in a large banner or poster. So when they enlarge your render, it should keep its quality, right? It shouldn't break into pixels. So you have to give a high quality render. And then we have all the materials here. Now this material editing is so hard, right? It's not like Lumion and lights, everything. Okay. And V-Ray also have its own small library, material library to be specific. Now, for the record, V-Ray doesn't have any trees or vehicles or character models, something like that. V-Ray doesn't have any library except this material library. That is also just a limited amount of collection, but that's enough for a beginner. But other than that, V-Ray doesn't have any library. So that's an issue. It's not an issue. That's a challenge when you work with SketchUp and V-Ray. So every model or so if you want to create an outdoor rendering, landscape rendering, then there's an issue with SketchUp and V-Ray. So where do we get trees? Where do we get grass? How to create terrains, right? So when it comes to the landscape part, the first thing is the terrain, right? Landscape never be a flat one. There are bumps and downs and terrains. In Lumion, it's easier. We call it sculpting. Okay. in landscape, just it's like a paintbrush, and we can select it and we start sculpting. Now it might seem very slow when I share this one, but just get to know it's very easier in Lumion to create landscape terrains. How to do it with V-Ray? Actually, we need to do it with SketchUp, not with V-Ray. So SketchUp has a specific plugin, we call it the sandbox. This is where we're going to create our terrains. If you want to do exterior renderings, outdoor renderings with SketchUp, right? See? So this also basically sculpting the land. Then we need to apply a ground material to it. Then we need to download tree models, right? It's not that simple. The polygon count matters. You know the meaning of polygon counts? Like for example, if you take this rectangle for, right? So it's a cube, like this cube, we call it's a one polygon. Okay. If you take a tree, for example, now tree has a lot of details. It has thousands of leaves, very organic shapes, branches, textures, everything, which means the model will be so heavy. Like for example, one tree model can weigh up to 70 MBs or 100 MBs or even 1 GB, 2 GB, etc. The problem is SketchUp cannot handle that much of details at once. Okay, so that is the issue, or that's why people love, or the architect, like the CG artist, love to do the exterior renderings or exterior modeling with Lumion. It's very easier. But again, when it's come to a production level rendering, if the client expects you to use the V-Ray even for the outdoor, then you need to learn how to create or how to download trees and how to set the exterior environment. And with that, the final thing is the post-production, which is by using the other editing softwares, for example, Photoshop. Now, what is the importance of having post-production is, let me show you this one. Right. Now here we have okay. Right, here we have two images. So this one in the left side is the direct output render from V-Ray without any editings. So we call it raw output, right? Raw render. In the right side is the final render that we're going to give to the client after doing some color gradings, right? There are logos, company logos, and our logos, and you can see, mist, right? A fog, snow kind of thing, smokes, etc., and some color difference, color variations, color balances. So that is the importance of having post production. Now this is not that much, right? There's no big impact for an editing stuff here, but let's take another example. Okay, now here, this one, right? Now this is they mentioned as before, right? The direct output from some rendering software. And then look how they significantly changed that image just by using Photoshop, right? So they have added sun rays, these birds, right? Skies, and more people, characters. So the thing is, we don't have to do everything with the rendering software. If you know how to use editing softwares like this in a professional way, like see this, see the motion of this car, we call it motion blur. We can simply do that in Photoshop. And how the tail light, this red light has been motion blurred, and how these people were placed with correct size, accurate size. Those are important things, right? And how they created the feel, how they entirely changed this raw output from an image, right? And there's another example. And this is another a subtle example like this. See, that's not that much different, but if you take a closer look at this smoke or this steam coming from this some glasses or thing, those are completely done with Photoshop. So it helps to feel that space, to increase the how to say, to increase the mood of that specific space that we're trying to create. So post production is an important thing in ArcViz. So we need to, so the 3D workflow is a huge process. It's not just creating model and clicking the button to get rendered. We need to do a bunch of test renders, right? So when it comes to test renders, we do this one. Have you seen these kind of renders? Just plain white, right? We call it the styrofoam rendering. There's a lot of names for this. Basically, styrofoam render. It's a specific style that we use to study the lighting of that specific scene. So basically, there are no materials at all. See, you can't see any materials, just white. But why we use this kind of renders? To see whether all the spaces get enough light, right? And to check if any dark spots, for example, this is not even a dark spot, right? Now this reflection, that's fine. So we can analyze the light, the environment light, it's enough or it's good enough. And we also send this to our client before the final render. So this is an interesting process and a time-taking process, of course. And as I mentioned earlier, the framing part, right? So how to frame a render, an image. Now you need to decide. Now this is what we call the aspect ratio, right? Have you heard about the term aspect ratio? So we can either have this kind of wide angle shot, right? This wide angle shot, or we can have this portrait shot. We call this portrait. So we can have a lot of aspect ratios. It depends on which part that we are going to show in that specific model, right? So that matters. And those are about just the basic, or we can call it like an overview of this 3D workflow. And just for your information, like we have whole lot bunch of other plugins in SketchUp. See, now this is a large plugin. We can have a staircase. We can create staircases. Now let's try and create this elevator, for example. Just give it a second. See, so within seconds, we could create an elevator. Or if we need a spiral staircase, it's simple. Now, of course, there's so much of attributes that we can change here, right? And we can have our own customized staircase like that. See, it's very simple to create elements like this with the help of these plugins. Right. So do you have any questions or doubts? In any part or in any software, or just random questions on this architectural visualization? Okay. Animations. Okay. Now, within our context, like the architectural visualization, we call it walkthroughs, like walkthroughs or fly-throughs. Yes, we can do perfect animations with Lumion, right? Lumion is the best way to create animations for architectural visualization. In SketchUp, as I mentioned earlier, there's a limitation. We can't do animation. We can't make things move from one point to another with SketchUp, but we still have some plugins for that, but it's very hard to create animations. So we choose Lumion to create our animations and walkthroughs because Lumion library have animated assets. For example, this human, right? Now see this human figure, for example, he's walking, right? So which means we can make this specific human figure walk from one point to another. So which means we can create a video animation. And that's, it's up to your creativity and your talent of understanding the specific software, right? And how deep you explore the possibilities of these softwares. So animation is basically with Lumion. And V-Ray animation, yes, there is V-Ray animation, but it's a very time-taking, time-consuming process. Now, just I told you, a single image takes almost an hour to get rendered, right? So just think about a series of images, which is a video. So it takes so much of time. For example, in Lumion, a 6 second or a 7 second video takes at least 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes in a standard computer to get rendered, right? Just 6 second video. The same 6 second video in V-Ray takes almost maybe 5 to 6, 7 hours to create in V-Ray. It need to render every frame one by one, frame by frame, right? And it won't give you the video format. It will give you images, series of images, and then you need to use a software, a video editing software, to arrange all the images next to it. Then a complete video will appear. So it's a hard job. So whenever whenever you get a demand, or whenever you get the work to do animation from your client, it's always better to choose Lumion. Yes, 3ds Max. Yeah. Now animation with 3ds Max and V-Ray is quite easier. Not depends on the time, but 3ds Max is something different, right? 3ds Max is a complete software. It also it used for many departments like game development or movie makings, everything. It's basically for animation. So animating with 3ds Max is way more easier if you learn the software. But now Chaos Group, the Chaos Group, they are the inventors of V-Ray. Okay, we call them Chaos Group. So Chaos Group created another software. We call it Chaos Vantage. Just this is not in your syllabus or anything, just for your information. Now Chaos Vantage is created for this special requirement to create walkthroughs. See, so this is basically Lumion. Now it's very advanced than Lumion. So we can get the exact quality from V-Ray 5 or V-Ray with this Vantage, Chaos Vantage. And now they also have a live link with SketchUp, which means you can sync your model from here to that Chaos Vantage, and you can create your own animation and video. So which means it's now possible to create animation with the quality of V-Ray. And this is not free at all. You need to pay for this Chaos Vantage. Like that, there are other softwares too. Okay, any other questions or clarifications? CPU requirement, you know, I'm not pretty sure about the Ryzen AMD side. I never used one. So I'm telling about the Intel one. It's better to, the CPU speed is the thing, right? CPU speed means in laptop we have one speed, a basic speed we call it, maybe 2.8, 2.9, 3.2 gigahertz, something like that. But when it's come to a desktop PC, the process differs. We can overclock a CPU. So basic speed will be 2.8, and when we overclock it will become 4.8 or 4.5, something like that. So basically a speed more than 3.5 gigs or at least 3 gigs is recommended, right? Recommended for an effective workflow. Product modeling, no. Actually, I'm sticking with the SketchUp, V-Ray, and Lumion. We don't do product modeling in SketchUp, right? Even we have specific plugins to do some products. SketchUp is not meant for product modeling. There are other softwares, for example, 3ds Max or Keyshot, ZBrush, character design, and Maya, Mud. There are a lot of other softwares for product modeling, not SketchUp. So I guess we have a webinar for product modeling. For example, SolidWorks, right? We do products most in SolidWorks. I guess we do have a webinar for what we call the SolidWorks. You need to get in touch with the administration. And we usually give free, not free, like cheap price, like the softwares SketchUp, Lumion, V-Ray 5, and also these material collections, like in our courses. So usually you can download this from without paying, okay? But through our course we give students access for this unlimited collection of materials and also 3D stuffs, like these rocks, windows, etc. Okay, yeah, it's about to end here. So this is not a very deep software webinar, but just an overall idea of how this architectural visualization works. What are the process you need to go through? Okay, right. I think so. We can wrap it up here. Do you have any additional things to clarify, or shall we end this session? Okay, so hope we'll meet in another occasion. Okay, thank you for joining.